it's been 3 months since the last chapters of Black Clover dropped, except it hasn't been. For those of you who've been keeping up with Black Clover's manga, you'll know about a year and a half ago, Black Clover went quarterly, which means that we're supposed to get 4 drops of chapters from Black Clover a year, once every 3 months. Now, in the beginning, these drops were only 1 chapter at a time, as Tabata, the mangaka, was dealing with some family and health issues and therefore needed to take a step away from producing manga on a weekly basis. However, as Tabata got more and more time kind of just kicking it at the house, he realized, oh, I don't like having free time. And so we started releasing 2 chapters at a time. In 1 month, he even dropped 3 chapters at a time. And thus, for the last couple of quarterly cycles, we've been getting at least 2 chapters of Black Clover every 3 months, which, you know, is a lot less than the chapter of Black Clover we were getting almost every single week for 8 years. But that's technically a 100% uptick in Black Clover releases. But now Tabata-san has decided to one-up even that. See, because the last time that we got 2 chapters of Black Clover was November 14th of 2024. And for those of you doing the mental math in your head right now, no, that was not 3 months ago. That was 2 months ago. So now we're not even doing quarterly anymore. We're doing tupley, or, you know, bi-monthly. That sounds a lot better. But if we're doing 2 chapters bi-monthly, that's basically just a monthly manga. So Black Clover fans, we're back. Anyways, as of today, January 9th, Tabata decided to drop 2 additional chapters of Black Clover. And it appears as though we are finally getting to the climax of this story, as Asta and Yuno have finally started their big final battle against Lucius Zagratis. And they may have actually already completed it. See, because chapter 377 and 378 focus on the hard counteroffensive by the Magic Knights of the Clover Kingdom against Lucius and his paladins. A counterattack that may have been completed in these 2 chapters. But these chapters also may have revealed that Lucius is not the final boss of this story. That maybe the final boss is somebody like Adremalek, or even one of the great titans that lies dormant around the Clover Kingdom. So yes, a lot happened in these 2 chapters, and as a lot of you readers have only been reading Black Clover every couple of months, everything that happened may have been a bit confusing. So in order to make sure that you're appreciating the peak that is this ending, guys, today we're going to be talking chapter 377 and 378 of Black Clover Explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So before we get to talking on chapter 377 and 378, let me paint the picture for you for what happened in the last couple of chapters. Well, Asta and Yuno have been a part of these last 10 or so chapters. Their battle against Lucius and his clones has been treated as kind of a background story, with the real focus of these last 10 or so chapters being on the other knights from the Black Bull squad, battling against paladins who may or may not have been important in their lives. Noelle battled against her mother in paladin form, Asier Silva. Noct, Yami, and Yumichika battled against Morgan Faust in paladin form. I know I said the last couple of chapters focus on other members of the Black Bulls that weren't Asta, but Asta also battles against Sister Lily as a paladin, and people like Magma and Luck have had to battle against Lucius clones, because the majority of the power of Lucius's army revolved around the fact that Lucius has the ability to make clones of himself, as Lucius has blood, bone, body, and soul magic, which allows for him to make other versions of himself that are apparently close to as powerful as he is. On top of that, through the usage of all of these combined magics, he's able to make paladins, who are the combined souls of magic knights and devils, in order to create what he identifies as the perfect beings. And in chapter 376, with the defeat of Morgan Faust's paladin, all of the paladins in Lucius's army were defeated. That's Sister Lily, who was defeated by Asta, Heath Grace, who was defeated by Yasuga. Yasuga is the strongest member of the Ryuza 7 from the Kingdom of the Sun, where Yami came from. Old guy, scar on his face, helped Asta train when he was in the Kingdom of the Sun. Very powerful as a character, never really explained why outside of Zetten. Anyways, he was enough to defeat Heath Grace's paladin one-on-one. Ural, who was defeated by Asta, Morgan, who was defeated by Yami, Noct, and Yumichika, Morris, who was defeated by Marileona, Asier, who was defeated by Noelle and her 2 brothers, and her sister a little bit, and Damnatio, who was actually the first paladin to be cut down the second that Asta returned to the battlefield from the Land of Sun. So chapter 377, the first chapter in the 2 chapters that were dropped, opens with Adremalek watching all of these paladins get cut down. Now, Adremalek, for those of you who don't remember, is the devil who stole the heart of Lucifero and delivered it to Lucius. He's kind of a Kabuto type in the Black Clover story, powerful enough to stand a chance against basically anybody in the universe, universe, but mysteriously motivated enough to not necessarily understand exactly what's going on with him. And while he appears to be loyal to Lucius, there's really no way to tell. Because if he was truly loyal to Lucius, then he would be helping in the battle against the Clover Kingdom magical knights. But instead, he's sitting back and watching, on top of a rock, floating next to the Clover Kingdom, thinking to himself, yeah, they're better than I thought they would be. It may only be a matter of time for the other fights as well. And as Adrammelak is saying this, we see that the Black Bull's hideout, being controlled by Henry, powered up with Asta's anti-magic, is using some kind of Gundam chest blast to blow away one of Lucius's clones. We then flash around the battlefield, apparently from the POV of Adrammelak, as we see things like Charlotte and Gordon working together to destroy multiple of Lucius's clones. We see Gray working with Vanessa to land a fatal blow on another one of Lucius's clones. And this seems to be the story everywhere, as all over the battlefield, we see some kind of combinations of Black Bulls destroying Lucius clones, whether that be Noel and Gauche or Zoro and Sekre. And as Adrammelak watches all of this, he ponders to himself, did Lucius see all of this coming? Now, Adrammelak is asking this question because Lucius has some kind of prophetic ability, some ability to see into the future, which is why Lucius has been able to see the future that he keeps preaching about bringing to the Clover Kingdom and the rest of the world. A future where he's able to reincarnate only the most important of the magical knights to create a perfect and peaceful kingdom. Thus, Adrammelak is wondering as to whether or not Lucius saw all of his paladins and all of his clones being defeated by human magical knights. And after Adrammelak says this out loud, he thinks to himself, now all that's left is. And it's at this point that we get a wide shot of the Clover Kingdom, which is now floating in the sky in multiple parts under a Tree of Queloth type construct that's controlled by Lucius. Because mind you, Lucius is the host for the devil Astaroth, one of the 3 original rulers of the underworld that disappeared and was later replaced by Megicula. And this contract with Astaroth is the reason that Lucius and Julius Novachrono, the old Wizard King, or I guess you could say current Wizard King, had time magic in the first place. And thus this giant tree bubble that we see is actually a monozone implemented by Lucius. Now, this giant monozone is being counteracted by Yuno's monozone, and that's actually brought up on this next page, as we see Asta and Yuno zooming towards the top of this monozone where presumably Lucius is staying. But as they're zooming towards Lucius's location, Belle comes up to Yuno and says, hey Yuno, at which point Yuno understands that Belle is trying to tell Yuno that Neverland, the monozone that he set up to counteract Lucius's monozone, that not only increases the magical output of all of the magical knights inside of it, but also decreases the magical output of the paladins, the clones, and stops Lucius from having the ability to use time magic, is apparently reaching its limit. However, fortunately, because this is Black Clover and very few things ever have any real consequences, as soon as Belle identifies that the Neverland monozone is crumbling because she's running out of mana, Asta hucks Yuno some of Charmy's magical food. And as Charmy's magical food allows for people to recover their magic basically instantaneously, Yuno horks it down and we're all set for the battle against Lucius. And therefore Asta says, now the 2 of us just have to cut down Lucius and destroy this huge spell. And thus the 2 of them land on the top of this gigantic monozone spell where Lucius is sitting in a throne. And this entire throne room is saturated with the white light of the tree that is growing around the Clover Kingdom capital. And as Asta and Yuno land on this platform in front of Lucius, he greets them, saying, oh, so you made it, Asta. Yuno. He then goes into a classic bad guy monologue saying, it's a shame. I see you intend to hinder the creation of my peaceful universe at every single step. At which point Asta does what he does best and cuts off Lucius, screaming at Lucius, I don't know whether or not the world you're trying to build will be good or not, and therefore I only have one question for you. Somebody that you made into a truly happy person regretted everything that she did the moment that she was no longer a paladin. Obviously in reference to Sister Lily and the fact that she was incredibly remorseful of all of her actions after Asta stopped her from being a paladin using Zetten. And as we all know, if you make Sister Lily cry, Asta's not gonna be happy about it. And so he screams at Lucius, you made Sister Lily cry. If you're bringing about the objectively correct future, then why did a good person like that have to suffer? And it's this point that Lucius pulls out apparently his 7th form of magic, which is gaslighting, as he says, it's all your fault, Asta. You are the world's flaw. When you show up, people suffer. Clearly, you understand at least that much, right? And it's this point that Yuno, who apparently Asta's been rubbing off on, no, not in that way, shippers. Calm down. Wait until the end of the story, at least. Decides to also butt into the conversation by saying, unbelievable. You're not a god, you're just some man who's upset when things don't go his way. You're nothing but a self-righteous bastard. And apparently Lucius is a little weird about swears because, yeah, this does not make him happy. In fact, after Yuno says this, the tree surrounding the Clover Kingdom capital begins to swell with power as we hear woom, 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 woom. And Lucius in this moment sits up from his throne while saying, so trying to persuade you is meaningless. And thus Lucius enters into a form that we've seen slight variations from all of his clones, where he grows horns and kind of like a biblically accurate angel, grows a dozen or so wings that appear to have mana circles at the end of them that look like eyes. And after assuming this form, he fires off a massive blast of mana towards Asta and Yuno, saying, I'll defeat you two and create an ideal world. Asta and Yuno are able to slice through this blast of magic while screaming, we'll smash it all up right alongside with you. And that's the end of chapter 377, and thus the final battle against the real Lucius has begun. That final battle starts and ends in chapter 378. Wait, I'm sorry, let me do that again. And that final battle starts and ends in chapter 378. Did I just blink with the wrong eye? Did I went like this? What? I can't. Why can't I close that eye? It's because I'm watching myself in mirrored. That was painful. Anyways, chapter 378 opens with Asta and Yuno rushing Lucius. Lucius knows that the best defense is a good offense and therefore rushes Asta. And with the right fist of God, launches Asta backwards. But he's got, and I'm gonna have to read this, soul time, gravity, body, blood, and bone magic, and elected for the good old right hook. However, in the time that Lucius was absolutely clocking Asta, Yuno got behind him, which is something that Yuno does a lot. It's probably got something to do with his wind magic that makes him incredibly fast. But have you guys noticed that every single time that Yuno ever gets behind somebody, it never turns out well for Yuno? Because in the moment that Yuno is about to strike down Lucius with his sword, Lucius generates multiple spines out of his back to stop Yuno's blade. And as this is literally the second time that Yuno has had to battle against a bone magic user, you'd think you would have this whole anti-bone magic thing figured out by now, but nope, not really. And that's while Lucius is blocking the blade of Yuno, he points his hands at Asta. And through a combination of body compression, which is gravity magic, jets of blood, which is blood magic, and bone bullet, which is bone magic, he from his palm fires a bone bullet at Asta, who is still reeling back from the punch that Lucius landed on him. However, Asta is barely in the nick of time, able to get his katana in front of the bullet to redirect it. And in this very same moment, yeah, apparently Yuno has figured out this anti-bone magic thing because he destroys all of the spines that Lucius was using to block his weapon, his gigantic wind polearm thing. And thus Yuno starts to press the offensive against Lucius, swinging his polearm at Lucius, but Lucius jumps out of the way. Now Yuno tries to catch him while he's in the air, but Lucius makes a shield out of presumably bone, and Yuno is forced to run his shoulder into the shield as hard as he can. However, in this moment, Lucius uses blood magic to shoot around the shield to slice up Yuno. Asta, apparently sick of letting Yuno get all of the screen time, uses a wall that he was hurtling towards to launch himself back into combat. But Lucius, who's still maintaining these shields to ward off Yuno, fires off more bone bullets at Asta, all of which Asta deflects. And therefore both Yuno and Asta are able to make their way to Lucius, as Yuno presumably breaks through Lucius's shields. But we see in some way or another that Lucius is repelling both of the attacks from Asta and Yuno with one arm each. But even though the two of them are being repelled, they are not being discouraged, as Yuno thinks to himself while slashing at Lucius, wind and star magic bursting inside of me with the unlimited potential of one who is loved by mana. While Asta is thinking to himself, anti-magic repels all different kinds of magic and obliterates it. And thus while the two of them are being repelled for the moment, it feels as though they're catching their stride. And thus Asta takes a big sweep at Lucius's lower half while Yuno tries to land an overheaded strike. But Lucius jumps and blocks Yuno's attack. While Lucius is focused on the offensive of Yuno, Asta creates distance between them and fires off an anti-magic slash at Lucius. Now the slash hits an after image of Lucius, but you can tell that Yuno and Asta are keeping up with Lucius. In fact, in the next panel, they do the thing where Lucius is a white beam of light and Asta is a black beam of light, and they just kind of like bounce into each other a couple of times. And while all this is going on, Lucius is thinking to himself, their two powers should obstruct each other. So why do they work so well as a team? Implying that Yuno and Asta's magics shouldn't work collaboratively. And that's true, they shouldn't. And not because Asta has dark magic and Yuno has light magic, but simply because no magic should work with Asta's magic. He has anti-magic. And so it's not really like Asta's magic doesn't work with Yuno's magic, it just doesn't work with anybody's. But it's at this point that Lucius realizes that they're not working together. In a very Blue Lockean way, they're actively trying to surpass surpass each other. And by doing that, they're surpassing what each of them thought each of them was able to do. That is to say that Asta is outperforming what Yuno believed that Asta could do, and vice versa. And thus, while Lucius is thinking this, as Asta is literally hucking his demon dweller at him, Lucius realizes as the two of them, both Asta and Yuno, come bearing down on him, that they are both surpassing his prophecy. That is to say that the overwhelming power of Asta and Yuno is changing the future that Lucius envisioned. And in this moment, as Lucius goes to defend himself with both of his arms, Asta strikes both of his arms with a Zeton. And this is obviously very important because it appears to be a fatal blow of sorts. But on top of this, let's remember how Zeton works. Zeton allows for Asta to choose what his anti-magic is attacking, which is why Asta getting Zeton in the first place was so important for the upcoming battles against the Paladins, because it would allow for Asta to attack the devil who was inside of the Paladin and not the person, which is why Asta was able to free people like Sister Lily. And therefore an argument could be made that Asta landing one or two or a couple of Zetons against Lucius would allow for him to not only attack Astaroth, but also Lucius, while keeping Julius Novachrono, who's still absolutely somewhere in there, relatively unscathed. And the more damage that Asta is able to do against Lucius or Astaroth, the higher chance that Julius has to break out of this Paladin-esque equation that is Lucius. However, one Zeton does not appear to be enough, as after Asta slices Lucius's arms, Lucius begins to heat up his core like he's Iron Man, presumably to launch some kind of magic laser at Asta. But before he can do that, there's somebody else in this fight, and that somebody else is Yuno, who smashes Lucius with a Saint Spirit of Boreas overhead polearm attack that creates a gigantic crater and seemingly obliterates Lucius. But in a story as old as anime, people start celebrating too soon, as Belle begins to blow on her horn and says, Yuno, you did it. And Asta looks at Yuno and says, you leveled up again, Yuno. And Yuno says, so did you, Asta. But as they stand in this crater of their own victory, they begin to feel the earth shake as a gigantic heartbeat begins to shake the temple that they're in with a ba-dum, 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 implying that something is coming. However, that something is going to have to wait, because that is how the chapter ends. So what is that thing that's coming? Is it Lucius's final form? Is it Adrammelech? Is it another Titan like the one that was defeated in Asta in Yuno's hometown? Well, I'll tell you right now, I don't think it's another gigantic demon. Not that that wouldn't be cool, but we are actively fighting against the literal kings of the underworld, and the gigantic demons whose skeletons we saw in places like Hage, Asta's hometown. Haj, I think it's Haj, have already been kind of downgraded in relevancy in the whole power scaling of this universe, as people like Asta and Marileona have shown to be able to 1v1 these threats with relative ease dozens of chapters ago. So who does this heartbeat belong to? Well, we can't really say for certain, but it is definitely a toss-up between some final version of Lucius and Adrammelech. See, the fact that we're hearing a heartbeat is kind of a hint, as the entirety of Lucius's story as a bad guy does start with Lucius consuming a heart, specifically the heart of Lucifero, and that heart is delivered to Lucius by Adrammelech. Now, because of the consumption of Lucifero's heart, Lucius has access to gravity magic, something that he literally used in this battle against Asta and Yuno. So it's a possibility that the reason that we're hearing this heartbeat is to draw attention back to the fact that Lucifero's heart exists within Lucius. And maybe we're gonna see some demonized chimera-esque form that's a combination of Lucifero and Astaroth. But what's also important to consider here, and was also re-shown to us in chapter 377, is that Lucius absorbed all three of his siblings, who had contracts with Lucifero, Beelzebub, and Magicula. And since all levels of the underworld were freed in the Tree of Krelov arc, Magicula, Beelzebub, and Lucifero were able to exist in the real world in basically their true forms. And therefore, Lucius is kind of the combination of the four rulers of hell, as he has both Magicula and Astaroth. This chimera-esque being could also include Beelzebub and Magicula. But there's also the possibility that there's some sneaky Black Zetsu-esque play here by Adrammelech, who's not only incredibly powerful, but also has a vendetta against Yuno that he wants to see exercised. And unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot to substantiate this point because Adrammelech is an unknown in Black Clover and in demonology. Adrammelech is a very minor demon in demonology. In fact, Adrammelech is actually an ancient Semitic god who's talked about briefly in the Book of Kings, where he's talked about as the god of the Sepharvaim, which is a city that was mentioned in the Bible that was captured by the Assyrians. And the word Adrammelech roughly translates to magnificent kings. However, as Adrammelech was a local deity for a city on the banks of the Euphrates, which is a river that runs through Western Asia and is one of the most important historical rivers in the entire world, as it was also the river that Babylon was built on, biblical accounts of Adrammelech do not paint him in a good light, as the Bible would identify Adrammelech as a pagan god. And thus the Sepharvites, the people who believed in Adrammelech as their god, would burn their children in and fire as sacrifices to Adramelech and his sibling god, Animalek, who doesn't exist in Black Clover. But this, I believe, is the most important tidbit about who Adramelech is in the history of our world. A pagan god who was vilified as a demon because its followers would burn their children as sacrifice to it. And thus, even though in the original sources of Adramelech's story he is a god, as a pagan god, Christianity deified him, and therefore in Christian-based literature, Adramelech slowly but surely became known as a demon. A demon with a donkey's head, a man's body, and peacock feathers. And in Paradise Lost, which has a lot of influence on Black Clover, mind you, Adramelech is a fallen angel who, alongside Asmodeus, is defeated by Uriel and Raphael, two angels. Now, according to the Infernal Dictionary, which is, yes, a real book written in 1818, Adramelech is the president of the Senate of Hell. I wish I was making this up, making him the Chancellor of Hell and the supervisor of Satan's wardrobe. All real things that have been written. But in Ars Goetia, a mid-17th century book about demonology, Adramelech is known as Andriel Fus, a demon of incredible power who rules over 30 legions of demons and can turn any man into a bird. Which is interesting because Adramelech's design in Black Clover appears to have some kind of feathers. So all this is to say, I'm not exactly sure, actually. Nothing about who Adramelech is in our history really denotes that he's gonna be the final boss of Black Clover. Adramelech serving the leaders of hell does track on what we know from him from real-life demonology, and while Satan doesn't necessarily exist in the Black Clover universe, Adramelech assisting the leaders of the underworld would track with what he would do in our real world. So do I think Adramelech is gonna be the final boss of Black Clover? No, not really. Do I think he's absolutely somebody we should be keeping an eye on? Also, yes, absolutely. So why did we talk about any of this? Well, because I wanted to teach you about demonology and history. Congratulations, you learned something. So if you guys enjoyed learning something or really enjoyed these 2 chapters of Black Clover, let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Hey, I had to take years of theology classes in high school, and sure, I didn't believe in any of it, but it's still interesting to learn.